Hello everyone, this is Jessica and this is my speed paint of a jellyfish girl. So this video is a big challenge to do, and as you can see right off the bat I'm struggling here because it's one of those things where when I click record I get really stressed out and feel like I have to draw perfectly, and of course I make a lot of mistakes. That's something I do have to work on, and it's kind of difficult to do so because I suppose I have that mindset where everything has to be perfect, but that's perfectionist me talking. Also, if you hear random noises in the background, I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do about it, my room's not soundproof. Anyways, so about the drawing itself, I felt like doing something jellyfish themed because it's really different to what I usually do. And I've got to say I love how it turned out, but at the same time there's a lot that I could have gone back and fixed, but so much for that. So anyways, for this part I probably should have just drawn the body itself and then drawn the clothes on top, but I wasn't thinking about that. I was in such a rush to get the line art done because I do like drawing. At the same time, line art is kind of the most frustrating part for me because being the perfectionist I am, I have to make it look perfectly crisp. But I don't know what I did with my voice just then, and I'm sorry. So anyway, as you can see, I was doing I suppose kind of the lazy way with the hands, where I was copying and pasting and tracing over it, but modifying the fingers. I suppose it's not necessarily the fully fledged lazy way, where I probably could have just copied that whole arm and switched it and maybe changed up the angle a bit and left it at that, but I did want to put some sort of effort into making both the hands look kinda different. But yeah, I could have been a bit better about it. So anyways, so for this part I was going to draw the dress and then the legs, but I knew it would be a bit of backwards and forwards between them to fix it, so I decided to be smart for once and draw the legs and then the dress. And for this part, I really like how it turned out, but drawing it was frustrating as heck because I wasn't sure what direction the line should be, and that is the jellyfish sleeves. But I don't like calling them jellyfish sleeves because it feels kind of morbid, like she just grabbed jellyfish and just smacked it onto her arms. So I'm just going to go ahead and say that they're translucent fabric with tassels. Speaking of tassels, you'll see in a moment I had really struggled with the longer tassels for the dress. But that's kind of because I was trying to do a thinner line art to make it look more like tassels. But oh boy, that was a challenge because I drew a few tassels, tentacles, whatever you want to call them. I drew a few tassels and then it didn't look right, so then I did a different technique where I selected, contracted, and realized it looked too uniform and tried to fix it, but yeah. So I decided to do a slightly better method where I erased the middle part, but it was such a tedious process and it didn't quite look right. So I keep going back and fixing it because some parts were too thin and some parts looked so janky and awkward. But at the end of the day I got them drawn, and that's what matters. So for the tentacles I decided to do them in different layers, so this makes it a lot easier to erase the underneath parts without interfering with the top layer. So if I did it all in one layer I would have to keep going back and fixing it because I would have erased the parts that I shouldn't have. It just makes it so much easier doing it in multiple layers. And it's a great technique if you're doing an artwork that has a lot of pieces crossing over each other to have different layers for these parts. And if you're wondering why I did these parts in red, it's because I was planning on having a light colour, which you'll see later in the video. This just makes it easier to see how it interacts with the rest of the line art. As for the hair, this is the part that I absolutely love doing, because I love drawing long flowing hair, and especially if it's in the wind or in this case underwater, because it just looks like it's flowing. And it's such a fun texture to draw because it kind of challenges you in a way where you have to think how the hair behaves, but it also is kind of fun for me to draw because it's so relaxing. Just drawing the different strands and stuff and drawing them layering each other, I suppose. It's a lot of fun to do, and I feel like it kind of works with the hat because it makes it look like tentacles. The hat itself I could have done a lot better with, but I couldn't be bothered fixing it. So for this part of the video, I'm preparing the image for the color layer, where I put down a base color and then I have clipping layers above. This is a great technique and it kind of helps you figure out what the colors are supposed to look like, especially if you put them on all on different layers. It sounds like a lot of layers and might be a little tedious for some people having to put layer after layer, but this is a great way, especially if you're unsure about the colors you've chosen. It sort of helps you flesh out your idea a bit better and modify certain parts easily, without accidentally modifying parts you shouldn't be. So all that aside, this is partly what I was talking about, where I was working with the top. I wasn't sure if I wanted it to be iridescent or not, and as I was putting down the colours I felt like it wasn't turning out perfectly, or at least the way I wanted it to, so I decided to just stick to light blue instead. And this part is a bit of a pain because I painstakingly selected everything in the tassel part, which was a mistake because it was a lot to select, and for some reason it didn't colour nicely because when I put the colours down it had a bit of that dreaded white outline, which I think a lot of digital artists can relate to. So I had to quickly fix that. As for the tassels themselves, I was going to colour the ends blue, but it was the same as the line art colour, so I decided to just make it pink instead. And for the jellyfish sleeves, I decided to put down different colours or darker shades of blue so it makes it look more three-dimensional. And I think it actually works quite nicely, especially when it's transparent. And of course I did the painstaking task of selecting all the tassels again. At least there's less of it on the sleeve, so it's a bit easier. And for the big part of the dress was a bit challenging because I didn't know how I wanted to colour that. Because I suppose it was a little bit harder because it's such a large area to work with and the colours look so blotchy and not that beautiful gradient I was trying to go for. But I think I got it right in the end. I decided to make the rest of the dress transparent so I get a better idea of how it looks, and that helped me out greatly. As for the hat, I was having second thoughts about it and I was kind of tempted to just keep it out of the image in general, but I think I made it work. I don't know, I kind of have mixed feelings about it looking at it now, but anyways. As for the shading, as you can see I started with blue, but I feel like it kind of sucked the life out of the drawing. Even though she's underwater, I just felt like I could have used the warmer colour, in this case pink. Because with skin it's kind of hard to shade, especially if it's in a cooler environment, because certain colours just make the person look so lifeless. So I decided to stick with a warmer shading to make it a bit easier for me. And that way I can have the blue on top, where I suppose it makes it look more like it's a bluer shading, which you'll see when I get to it. But as for now, I was having a bit of a hard time with the hair because there were so many areas to shade, but then again that can be said about whenever I shade hair in general, is that it's such a tedious task for me. Even though drawing the hair itself is a lot of fun, shading it's a different process. But anyway, as for the top, I was having a bit of a hard time getting the lines to look right, and even now I'm kind of, I suppose, having second thoughts about certain line placements. I could have drawn some lines with the line art, but it's one of those things where it's like shoulda, coulda, woulda, but didn't, which can be said about a lot of parts of this drawing. So anyways, I'm also doing the second layer here. I'd like to do 2 layers of shading because it adds more dimension, because some parts have darker shading than others. There's not really much to say about the shading layers, other than it was kind of a pain in the backside because some parts didn't quite look as good as I wanted them to. And I went back and changed some of the colours to blue, with the blue areas, to make it look more natural, I suppose. And I actually copied the shading layers and tried to make some parts blue, but I don't know, it didn't look right to me, so I decided to fix that in a different way, which you'll see soon. But anyways, for this part I just put the background colours in to make it easier to colour in the top part and do the effects. So also went back and duplicated the lighter line arts and blurred it to make it look like it's kind of glowing. And for this part I just did a gradient of purple and put it on multiply and erased some parts to make it look like the light's hitting it, and then changed it blue. I also did another layer with a darker colour which you just saw, but for some reason I didn't keep it in, even though that would have added an extra bit of dimension. So for the highlights I just did the yellow and changed the layer style, because that's my usual method of highlights. And there's just a bit of touch-ups here and there. At some point I quickly went back and fixed some of the colour areas so it fits in better with the line art and just looks a lot more finished. And for this area I just drew the bubbles in, which it was kind of a challenging area because I didn't know how I wanted to go about it, if I wanted them to be realistic or cartoon-like, and as you can see I was just doing different methods. I've had a few tutorials from Google of people drawing bubbles, but it didn't quite look right because it was too realistic. Well, too realistic of a style. It just didn't look right in general. So I decided to just do a cartoon bubble effect type thing. Something really simple, but I feel suits better with the drawing. I actually was going to add some jellyfish and I went to draw them, but it looked kind of inappropriate and I decided to delete that part of the video. Because I didn't feel like getting comments where people are saying, haha, you drew something inappropriate by accident. So here's the image itself. I think it turned out quite nicely. For those wondering, TotallyMad8 is also another username I sometimes go by, just to avoid confusion. Anyway, thanks for watching and I hope you enjoyed this video.